Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda, and I'm a student at the University of Alabama, majoring in nutrition. So, first, let me start off by saying thank you for joining me today and listening as I discuss nutrition labels and how to exactly read them. So, first, I want to touch base on the many labels that you might come across in the stores. Um, while many are helpful and great, there are others that aren't. So, it's important that you don't get fooled by these labels, but rather be able to check out the back to get the important stuff or the nutrition facts. So, it's unfortunate that some companies get away with putting enticing labels on their products that aren't FDA approved, but that's why today's discussion is really important. So, some popular labels that you might already be familiar with are made with fresh fruit or fresh or cholesterol free. So, these don't always mean that the food is healthy, so don't get tricked. When looking at the nutrition facts, first will be the serving size, and it will always be in bold. The serving size is not necessarily how much you should eat, but rather a typical portion. So it also helps break down the amount of micronutrients, macronutrients, vitamins, and minerals in a food. So be aware of how much you're eating because you might be consuming several portions at one time. For example, if you ate 2 servings of this food, you would need to times everything by 2. So technically, you'd be consuming 460 calories and so on. When we aren't paying attention, it's easy to eat several portions at a time without even realizing. So a good suggestion might to pre-portion your food into a separate container rather than eating directly out of the bag or out of the package. Next up are the calories, and calories will also be in bold. And calories indicate how much energy we get from the food item. We must supply our body with a basal amount of calories to keep our body functioning and performing just the tasks it requires to stay alive and breathing. But of course, we need additional calories to perform additional daily activities, such as brushing our teeth, checking the mail, or even going on a walk. So most of us are familiar with calories and sometimes focus on them more than anything else. But it's important to consider all the nutrients in the food. While a snack pack of cookies that is 100 calories is a better choice than, say, having a whole bag, it doesn't mean that it's in any way healthy. Just remember, we can't stop at calories. We must read the entire label. So the total fat includes all the fat in the food, including saturated fat, trans fat, monounsaturated fat, and polyunsaturated fat. Fat is essential in the diet because it's a great source of energy, and we need certain fats like fats for things like absorption of fat soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K. It's also important for our cognition and other biological functions. So, however, there are certain fats to try to avoid, such as trans and saturated fats. Remember, all fat is not created equal. For instance, you'll see saturated and trans fat noted on this nutrition facts panel. This food is relatively low in saturated fat, and it contains no trans fat, so that's pretty good. Look for foods that have monounsaturated fat and polyunsaturated fats. Now that brings us to cholesterol and sodium. Cholesterol is a type of fat, and yes, we need it for things like digestion and hormone production, but we do not need to get it from dietary sources because our body actually makes its own cholesterol. You're probably familiar with cholesterol and its detriment to our arteries, and this is because when we consume too much cholesterol from dietary sources, it continues to circulate in our blood and causes plaque on the artery walls. It's best to look for foods with no or very minimal cholesterol in them. Since cholesterol is synthesized in the liver, anything with a liver will produce cholesterol. So that's why the only dietary sources of cholesterol are animal products. Now for sodium. When looking at food labels, we need to pay attention to the sodium content because it can be extremely high, especially in processed foods. This is usually to extend shelf life. The recommended daily intake of sodium for adults is no more than 2,300 milligrams. So consider this when choosing your foods. Carbohydrates on the nutrition labels include starch, fiber, and total sugar. It's best to look for foods high in dietary fiber and low in sugar. Many diets aim to avoid carbohydrates, but again, this is another important macronutrient and one of the best sources of energy. Carbohydrates are turned into a fuel source to keep the many functions of our body working smoothly. Look for foods that do not include or have very little added sugars. This might include things like peanut butter and sauces. So you can usually find alternatives that do not have added sugars. Good sources of carbohydrates can be found in foods like fruits, beans, and whole wheat breads. Next is protein, and proteins are pretty straightforward, and good sources of proteins include beans, lean meats, and dairy products. For the additional nutrients here, vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium, they're on food labels because these include some of the most common nutrition deficiencies we see in the United States. And consumers should make sure that they're getting enough of these nutrients in their daily dietary intake. The nutrition label might include other nutrients here, but none other are listed. So the ingredients list. The list of ingredients will include everything that's in the food product. This is especially important for people that might have allergies or food sensitivities. The ingredient list goes by weight, so the first item on the list will be the most abundant in the product. Try to avoid choosing foods that have a really long ingredient list. Generally, the longer the list, the more additives and preservatives that went into making the food. So let's read some takeaways here. So don't get fooled by marketing or claims that aren't approved by the FDA. Always consider serving size, so try portioning your food before consuming. Find foods that have less saturated and trans fats and more monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. Don't be afraid of carbs, yet look for good sources and avoid added sugars. Look at the first ingredient on the ingredients list. If it's sugar, then it's probably not a good food choice. Don't focus on any one single nutrient. Remember to consider all of them when making healthy choices. Again, thank you for listening today, and I hope you learned something and feel a little bit more confident going into your grocery store and reading these nutrition labels. Please remember to fill out the form that's below this presentation. And again, thank you so much and take care.